Okay, students, this is for blog post 421, the Battle of the Somme. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the similarities that this battle has with the Second Battle of Ypres that we've already studied, and also similarities it has with World War I as a whole. What characteristics or attributes does this particular battle encapsulate that define really World War I altogether? And so let's go ahead and just get into it. The Second Battle of Ypres, the last one that we just discussed, the last battle that we discussed, happened in 1914. So right after the beginning of the battle itself, or excuse me, at the beginning of 1915. And this battle, the Battle of the Somme, that we're going to be talking about, happened in 1916. It happened beginning in the summer, July of 1916, all the way through to November. So it was about a 6-month battle, or a 4-month battle. It was a fairly long piece of battle, a piece of warfare. So while you're listening to my voice, I want you to scroll down on the blog post and look at the map itself of France where this battle has taken place. And as you can see with the black arrow on your map, this particular battle takes place in the northern part of France, directly south of Dunkirk, and honestly not too far away from Ypres in Belgium. And this particular spot holds essentially the same strategic point as Ypres, in that neither force, the German Central Forces or the Allies, can afford to have this particular part of France succumb to the other side. Britain, France, they can't afford to have their seaports taken away from them. They can't afford to have resources taken away from them, or the ability to get resources in, or reinforcements in. So they cannot give up the Battle of the Somme, whereas the Germans cannot afford to let the Allies pass them into Belgium because they cannot afford to have their railways compromise, and so they cannot afford to also be cut off effectively from the southern and eastern parts of their army. So you can see where this battle took place. You can also see under closer review, so we'll review this later, the second map, which shows at several points in the months-long battle where each army existed. As you can remember, battles often took place like this. Each side would have a trench. And so if this is the British side and this is the German side, each side would be digging deep into the ground, 6, 7, 8-foot trenches. And in between the trenches of both lines would be an area called no man's land here, that neither army could have a claim to, and that was exceedingly dangerous, and that the other army, if they wanted to attack, would have to cross no man's land, the area that doesn't belong to either army, and essentially overcome their enemy in their trenches. Now, interestingly enough, at the Battle of the Somme, a very low piece of technology, a very, very unspecialized piece of technology, really caused the most damage in the Battle of the Somme. And that piece of technology is something that you might not even think of as technology, and that is barbed wire. And so barbed wire almost single-handedly fought the Battle of the Somme. So what would happen is you'd have the German army here and the English army, because most of the combatants were either French or British, fighting, and you'd have these trenches, and lined on top of the trenches, many feet, would be feet and feet and feet of nearly invisible barbed wire. So when General Haig, the commander of the British forces at this battle, would send young men from, let's see, they would be, I have to flip it in my head. This is Germany. So from the British side, if he would have to send young men over, he would essentially send artillery shots over to the other side, trying to eliminate that barbed wire. His reasoning was that if we shot the barbed wire with artillery shells, it will destroy the barbed wire, and then my young men can run across and attack the Germans. Because what would happen before then is that the young men were running across no man's land, somehow making it through the artillery, making it through the machine guns, making it through all of this dangerous stuff, only to get caught, literally strung up like a scarecrow in the barbed wire that they couldn't see very well in battle. It's very difficult to see when it's out and about, and they get stuck, and essentially they would be just sitting targets, and the Germans would just shoot them. And that's how they lost thousands and thousands and thousands of men, is literally just getting caught in barbed wire. And General Haig knew that we had to get past this. And so he was holding out for a particular piece of British technology that would come out in September. But until then, he knew in order to make it possible for that British technology to take place, he would have to get rid of this barbed wire. And so he continued to send man after man after man after man after man to get stuck in that barbed wire, to get killed at the Battle of the Somme. Now, we see three characteristics in the Battle of Ypres and the Battle of the Somme that the two battles share that are sort of indicative of World War I. And the first is trench warfare. And we've talked about the trenches in depth, and that is definitely a presence here in this battle. And the second is absolutely horrific, devastating loss of life. We're not talking loss of life in the hundreds. We're not talking about loss of lives even in the thousands. We're talking loss of life in the hundreds of thousands. This is an untold amount of people that are dying in this particular battle. And so, and the third thing that we see that is the same in both battles is both battles are the showcase of a new piece of warfare, a new piece of technology, innovative weaponry, innovative warfare. Now, obviously, in the Second Battle of Ypres, that innovative warfare was chemical warfare. It was the gas that was used by the Germans on the French and British soldiers to kill them, that horrible yellow gas. In the Battle of the Somme, the innovative piece of warfare that would be used was not the low-tech barbed wire, but rather the high-tech at the time Mark I tanks. And so again, Haig is incredibly criticized for his actions at the Battle of the Somme, where he continued to send young man after young man after young man to his death to try to get rid of this barbed wire resistance, because he knew that he would have these brand new inventions, these Mark I tanks, that would hopefully, in the battle in September, push through the German front and essentially in the Western Front of World War I. So in his mind, he was justifying all of these losses and saying, you know, they're just making it happen. They're making it ready for the tanks that will finish it off, that will help everything. And so in September of 1916, when these tanks finally are unveiled, because they were secretly constructed, I think under the code name of like large underwater vessels or something, like a big underwater pot or something like that. That is how they were built under the title. When they appeared on the battlefield, and you'll see pictures of these tanks here, they're very, very clumsy Caterpillar wheels. The British and the German didn't really know what to think of them, because they were these slow-moving, impressive, loud, destructive-looking machines. And this was the first time that tanks were actually used in action, in battle, was at this Battle of the Somme. And so imagine you're in this months-long battle, you've been here, you don't know if you'll ever get out, and all of a sudden your enemy shows up with 50 of these huge mechanized monsters. And you're looking at them like hundreds of thousands of men have already died. Here come these things. And it really does strike fear into the heart of the German people. Unfortunately for Haig and for the British allies, the tanks don't immediately push through to the German army. They're plagued with malfunctions. Some of them literally fall in holes, the trenches. Some of them break down, they get stuck, and the German fighters are able to literally climb on side and start beating them. They're not as capable as they are hoped to, but this does pave the way to future advancements in tank warfare, and this changes the face of land warfare to come. So after the unveiling of these tanks at the Battle of the Somme, the Germans basically go, and they start to, as feverishly as they can, construct their own tanks. And the German constructed tanks would become incredibly important in the years to come following World War I and their own land warfare, because again, we will start to see in World War II the blitzkrieg idea of fast lightning warfare utilizing these particular tanks that they see for the first time at the Battle of the Somme. Okay then. So, one other thing that made this particular battle more horrific was the fact that whole battalions, whole communities of people would die at the Battle of the Somme. What they would have is not necessarily men from every different part of England all comprising one battalion. What they would have is basically called PAL battalions. PAL, like as in friend, battalions. So they would be friends or people all from the same street, or all from the same neighborhood, or all from the same part of a city, all in one battalion. And then they would all get wiped out all at once. So you would have one street in England where every young man would have passed. This added to the horrificness of World War I and the closeness to home that World War I showed. Like I said, it was also a very widespread battle, meaning that a soldier fighting in the northern part of the Battle of the Somme might meet a soldier who fought in the southernmost part of the Battle of the Somme. Of the Battle of the Somme after the war, and then finally realize 50 years later, whoa, we both fought in the same battle and have miles and miles of geographic difference, never met up. It is a very widespread, a very intense battle. The things that I want you to look at when you're studying this particular battle is what attributes does this battle share with World War I as a whole? The second thing, what does it have in common with the Battle of Ypres? And how does technology, how does the technology of the chemical warfare, how does the technology of the tanks, how does the technology literally of the low-tech technology of barbed wire, how does this influence warfare, and specifically who wins, who loses? What does the role of technology have to do with modern warfare? Those are things that I want you to look at. We will talk in class about the specific responses, and we will also talk about the Western Front, but this is our last battle that we are looking at. We can look at the tanks in them itself. Make sure you look at the pictures of the tanks. They don't look like what you would expect. And imagine what you would feel like if something like that was rolling your way. We will talk about all of these questions in just a minute. I will see you guys later.